Larry?
Well, I mean, that's an act of war. Do we really want to start a war? I mean, it's working right now. The revolutionaries within Iran are not Americans; they're Iranians. And the people who are working to undermine the current government in Iran aren't Americans; they're Iranians. I don't think that we should send American troops and put them inside Iran right now, when the revolutionary movement is actually going along relatively well. The Green Revolution didn't die; it just went underground. I mean, true, President Obama could have done something to help them. He probably could have helped push the situation further toward freedom in Iran rather than the oppression that they're now under. But let the Iranians do it themselves. Let them have meetings themselves. Let them organize resistance themselves.
Are they
I'm
going
sure
to do
if
that?
they needed assistance, they needed equipment, they needed whatever, that could be provided. But it's better to let them do it than to send Americans in, foreigners in. Remember, it was a lot of the appeal of Khomeini was throwing the foreigners out. So allowing a homegrown revolution to flourish in Iran, which it is, I think is the right way to go. I think sending foreigners in gives a rallying cry to the supreme leader, to the mullahs, and so forth.
Okay. Rick, that answer your question?
Answers the question.
Okay. Do you think there was more then that we could have done, and what might it have been effective in the Green Revolution under Obama?
Oh, absolutely. But President Obama basically let him die. He let that spark die, but the spark was not extinguished.
Smoldering.
It just went underground, and it's building momentum, and that's what the Supreme Leader and the Revolutionary Guard fear, which is why they're doing what they're doing. I mean, they want to fix the problem through war, and so when we should not oblige them proportionately in a way that helps them.
Okay.
Yeah, would not those sending, like you mentioned, possibly helping the revolutionaries with equipment or with maybe even weapons? I think you said equipment. I'm not sure you said weapons.
Equipment, yeah.
But if we provided weapons and equipment to the revolutionaries, wouldn't that be almost as much of an act of war as sending them guidance?
Unmarked Chinese-built burner phones.
Exactly. Well, no, Ed's right. I mean, there are ways to supply people with arms and equipment that don't tip the U.S. hand rather than sending in Americans who, if they're captured, become a real embarrassment to the nation. We can do things short of sending human assets. And we can provide, we can provide Russian-built equipment to Iran or Chinese-made equipment or wherever it's going to come from to show that it doesn't necessarily tip a U.S. hand. Doesn't look like it was made in the USA. Wasn't made in Michigan.
Yeah.
Well, Larry, I think I'm in total agreement with your sentiments. But what seems important to me is I think that that dissatisfaction is still there. I see on posts and news articles that you've got real feminists in Iran fighting the religious police, standing up and ripping off their headscarves.
I've had missionaries tell me that there's a big Christian element to this resistance also.
And it seems to me that we could support them either by Radio Free Iran or whatever, but by simply not giving them pallets of money like Obama, keeping the sanctions on, and don't fall for that little provocation, so they pump up patriotic fervor. And I think if we stay the course, I think it'll help.
Well, sometimes when you put pressure on a sore, it bursts. And we're putting a lot of pressure on these guys, and this drone attack may have just been a reaction to all the pressure that we're putting on them. Like, you take World War II, a lot of people forget that we were putting a lot of pressure on Japan in the Pacific, a lot of economic pressure on them to where they're, Pearl Harbor was, we didn't cause World War II, but they did, but that was their reaction to what we were doing. And so I wonder if,
I think your guest is absolutely right on this point. They try to provoke us into a reaction by shooting down the drone. If we go into reaction, all of a sudden now we are at war with Iran, and that way they get rid of a president they don't like.
But what's the next provocation? Trump. What's the next provocation? Airliner? What's the next provocation?
I think if their provocation gets much worse, if he doesn't go to war against them, then he would lose the election. But shooting down the drone, I think the president acted correctly.
Should it be go to war, or should we take out they hit a ship, we take out a ship, or two ships, okay? But, hey, not commit troops. I mean, what? They can't attack us. All we have to do is contain them. Is that right, Larry?
Well, right. I mean, they could come over the frontier into Iraq or do something like that, but I don't think they're ready to do anything like that, or they probably would have done it. The U.S. has a number of options that we can use besides just economic sanctions. We could mine not the Straits of Hormuz, we could mine their harbors. So they can't pump oil. Ships don't arrive. They go to the Saudi side or whatever. Obviously, we start mining, the Iranians start mining, and it becomes it creates a situation that we want to avoid, which is squeezing our allies. I think the U.S. is sitting in a pretty good situation now. I mean, we don't need oil from the Middle East anymore. We now see to our own oil needs in North America.
Okay, hey,
but
Larry,
that's not true of Asia, and it's not true of a lot of other places.
Right. We've got, I can see we're not going to leave the Iran topic for anything after this regardless. So we've got a couple callers, Tom from Detroit and Gary from Hazel Park. So I'm going to ask Tom to pose a question or comment first. Tom?
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad that we didn't go running in their guns blazing. I was carrying around a 1A draft card in 1969 in Vietnam, and nobody could figure out why we were over there. And I don't think it did us a lot of good. And it does seem like, those oil tankers, they weren't even our tankers. It seems like if they shut down the Straits of Hormuz, it would help us that, the oil prices go up there. We have a lot of domestic supply. It would strengthen our GDP. And Trump, he's saying, well, we got time on our side. What's the worry, and why does it even have to be public? If he does retaliate in some way, why does he even have to tell anybody? As long as it's something that makes him stop.
That brings up a point, Tom, that if we were to pull the sanctions off of Iran, and I'd hate to think, here's a tinfoil hat, I'm sitting in Gary's chair, but if we were to pull the sanctions off Iran, wouldn't the price of oil drop worldwide? And if the price of oil dropped worldwide, we couldn't afford to frack anymore, could we? Larry?
Probably not. Well, I know that a lot of fracking got shut down when the price dropped back here some years ago.
Larry, you have an opinion on that?
No,
I don't think that the sanctions have a whole lot to do with oil prices. I mean, I will tell you that based on capacity to pump, the Saudis can raise or lower the oil prices at any time. We don't have that kind of capacity. We may have more reserves, but they have the capacity to pump and deliver oil.
Well, right now is
and they're not tied to the Straits of Hormuz either. They can pump the oil into the Red Sea. They can do all sorts of things. It's the Saudis who have the capacity.
Okay,
to move the price of oil far more than Iran does. Iran has a lot of crumbling infrastructure. It's like Iraq. They do pump oil, obviously, but in terms of their capacity, nothing can beat the Saudis. And the Saudis can stop pumping or they can start pumping, and they really are the market makers.
Rick, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to. I used to work in the oil fields here in Michigan, and throughout the United States.
Yeah.
And we may have noticed last week here in Michigan, over the last few weeks, the price of gas going down. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't know this, but the reason the price of gas has gone down so heavily in the last few weeks, and it's going to go down dramatically more, is U.S. actually picked up production over the last few months, and it has actually produced more oil over the last few months out of this country alone than Saudi Arabia, which is remarkable.
Wow.
And which is why we produce so heavily, it drove the prices down.
Okay. Let's see. Tom, did you have anything else?
Yeah. About the, I'm sorry, I was listeing to Rick and I forgot it.
I never did
I have that effect on people. Just ask my wife. I speak and she forgets everything.
If I only had a brain, thanks.
Okay, well, dead air. So, Tom, if you think about it, call Derek and tell him, and he'll let us know what it was, and we'll bring it up, okay? Okay, I guess, Tom's gone. Okay, so that leaves room for Gary from Hazel Park. Hey, Gary.
Hey, good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
One of the things that I'm operating on is that we can't ever forget that the mullahs in Iran, are operating also with a religious fervor because they want to bring about the end times by getting the 12th imam out of the well. And to do that, they have to go to war. And so they're trying to egg us into fighting. So we got to keep that in mind. Is that correct?
What about that, Larry?
I think that's partially true. I mean, there's certainly a religious aspect to it, but at the moment, I think they want to stave off revolution that would really bring about freedom in Iran, freedom from the mullahs, freedom from the supreme leader, and freedom from the religious system that's currently in place. I don't think they'll stop being Shiite Muslims, but the radical, oppressive government that's in place is bothering the man on the street a lot more than the religious fervor of the hidden imam. I think there are some people who use that as an excuse, and certainly could use it as an excuse. But the practical reality of people on the street being hungry and unemployed, and I mean that's the real problem that they have.
Rick? Oh, Alex?
No, I agree with Larry that the sanctions are having effect, and people are hurting in Iran. And actually, the good thing is that there's people old enough to remember when the mullahs weren't didn't have Iran under
the Shah, you mean?
Yeah. Well, no. Yeah, under the Shah, at least there was some Westernization and Western values. And there's enough people old enough that remember those days, and I think there's a little bit of longing to have a little more freedom.
That's a good point. You think that's the case, Larry?
You know, I think when you look back, especially to the days of the Shah and even before that, you know, the Iranians, Persians love luxury as a culture. They love luxury. They love fine perfumes. They love this. They love that. They love fine fabrics. They love nice cars. I mean, they're a luxury loving people, and always have been back thousands and thousands and thousands of years. They don't have that anymore. All that stopped.
So they resent it.
And I think they do. I think they a lot of it's private within your own home. A lot of it's, you know, it's a different culture.
Okay.
But they still love luxury, and they don't have luxury under this regime. And I think there's a lot of people who feel that if somebody else was in charge and the sanctions were lifted, that they would all live a lot better, and they're correct. They would.
Okay, Gary, did you have anything else?
Yeah, I'd also like to agree with the statement about the oil. When Donald Trump became president, he said it would take a couple of years for it to kick in, and that's exactly what happened. And it should get better as the years progress.
Okay.
Right.
I'm wondering, curious, does it matter what the man on the street thinks about in Iran, given the mullahs are the ones that don't really seem to care? That's my question.
I don't see. Yeah, of course,